Okay, why don't you go ahead and say your name and spell it for the record, please.
Okay. My name is Lawrence. I go by Ed Kamberger with a K, A-M, B like boy, E-R, G like George, E-R. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and where I enlisted in the Navy at. Currently, I live in York, Pennsylvania. Okay. As a teenager, I'm born in 1960, but as a teenager and during the bicentennial of America's 200th birthday, Baltimore Harbor was inundated with Navy ships from all over the world. And I saw them girls going crazy for sailors. So I had to be a sailor.
It's always a good incentive.
Yes. And then my family went camping down Myrtle Beach and working our way up the coast. We stopped in North Carolina, and I visited the battleship USS North Carolina Memorial, toured the ship, and that set me in motion for my naval career, which was short-lived. I only did 3 years, but I enlisted in delayed entry out of high school and had to wait 11 months to report for boot camp. I went to boot camp in Chicago, Great Lakes, and picked a job that would almost guarantee me shipboard duty, which was navigation.
Okay.
Everybody in my class got a ship except for 2 people. So I was very glad to get a ship. Never, ever heard of Duluth. When they told me I was going to the USS Duluth, I thought they said Deluche. I had no idea what it was, but I was going to a ship and I was happy. And it was in San Diego, so I was going to get to see California. Being from Maryland, I'd never been farther east than probably Tennessee. Went to Orlando for my A school, which is your job training, and did that there, and then went home for 30 days recruiter assistance, and I understand I was responsible for 3 more recruits.
Okay.
Drove to California and got on my ship, reported in May of '79, and we left on a overseas cruise, Westpac they call it, in July, and got to tour. We went to Hawaii, and being a troop transport ship, we had to pick up our Marine detachment in Hawaii, some 900 Marines. You know, you try getting in chow line behind them. If you weren't a watch, you had to fight for yourself, because watch standards got meal first.
Yeah.
But anyway, we picked those up, and then we went on to Okinawa, Japan, and we changed commands with the ships that were there, you know, on their way back to the States while we were in deployment overseas. We kind of hubbed around the Philippines, the Subic Bay Naval Base, in and out of there while we were doing our operations, and went to the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of New Townsville, and we did Operation Kangaroo 3 with the Australian and New Zealand navies, and practiced hitting the beach. Our Marines deploying on the beach and having the fake battlefield games. And after that exercise was over, we pulled into Sydney for 7 days, and got to see Cheap Trick playing on the steps of the Opera House.
Nice.
After we left there, we went to New Caledonia and Fiji, 2 different ports, small and nice, tropical. And then back to the Philippines, for our hub operations in the area. And then we went to Hong Kong for Christmas. Beautiful city. At the time, was still British occupied and owned. And beautiful city. We had to anchor out, so you had to take a shuttle boat into land, but absolutely gorgeous. And while we were in Australia, I didn't mention, the Iranians took our hostages at the embassy, and we got orders when we were leaving Hong Kong at Christmas time. We were supposed to go back to Cebu Philippines, and they diverted us to Singapore, that we would be in a closer proximity for an airstrike in Iran if we needed to be.
Okay.
We sat 5 days in Singapore, another beautiful country. The litter laws are very strict. You can't even spit gum on the sidewalk. The cleanest, most beautiful city I ever been in. And a great port. And they decided we weren't needed to go into the Persian Gulf, Indian Ocean. They brought us back, and we changed commands at a small bikini atoll called Eniwetok.
Okay.
I was in navigation, and one of my jobs was to plot or take bearings to different objects, lighthouses and mountain tips and points of land, so the ship can plot their course. And an atoll is a volcano head below water.
Oh, wow.
And when we went into the lagoon, the middle of the volcano,
Right.
you could see the ridge, the side of the mountain coming up as you go over, and then you see it going back down, and then we anchored in the lagoon. But because I was a fresh air guy and I was up on the bridge wings, I got to see everything and looked over the side, and that lagoon was packed full of hammerheads. I'd never seen a hammerhead before.
Yeah.
But anyway, we changed commands, went back to Hawaii, dropped our Marines off, back to San Diego in Valentine's Day, 1980, and that's another thing. We spent New Year's in Singapore.
Okay.
Is
it a little crazy?
79, 80,
Yeah.
a little bit. And then in March we went down to Acapulco to 2-week cruise, R&R, and it was a nice visit. And then we came back and went in the shipyards. I was able to go on temporary duty on another ship for 30 days while our ship was in the yards, and keep my my skills fine-tuned.
Right.
And then after my tour was up, I was discharged and stayed in San Pedro, California for 10 years, where we were in the shipyards. And then I stayed in touch with some Navy guys. And funny, I ran into Don, who's the president of our association, at Arlington National Cemetery. I was there visiting with my 4 or 5-year-old son, looking at Kennedy's grave. And I look up and see this guy wearing an LPD-6 hat. And I went over to him and I said, well, when were you on it? And come to find out, it was Don. His son was in the Marine Corps, stationed in Quantico, Virginia, and they were doing the bus tour of Arlington.
That's crazy.
So we exchanged numbers and stayed in touch, and then he proceeded to organize this Crew Members Association and the reunions, and I was a founding member, the first reunion.
Okay.
So I guess that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Do you want to tell me a little bit more about like your day-to-day as part of Navigator?
Okay.
Crew?
Well, everybody that has not made rank, which is non-commissioned officer, which is E4. So you're E1, E2, or E3, you're a non-rate, even if you have a job on a ship, are required to do what we call mess cranking.
Okay.
Mess cooking.
Oh, okay.
So,
I was going to say, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, we call it mess cranking, and there's a variety of different things you can do. Some guys would go work in the chief's mess, and that was the primo assignment, because the chiefs all pitched in and paid you a tip, and you got to eat the chief's food.
Nice.
Which was always better than the regular enlisted crew.
Yeah.
But all the chiefs had to agree on letting a mess cranker come in there. They had to be in unison with who they picked. My first time, right when we got ready to leave on our cruise, I was picked for the wardroom, which is the officers' mess.
Okay.
So during the day, I had to clean officers' quarters, their bathrooms, and their hall, the passageways. And then meal times, I was actually in my We called them salt and peppers, white shirt, black pants, and I served them like a waiter.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that was meal times, and then after meal times, did whatever needed to be done around there as housekeeping. I did do a second tour because each division contributes a person to do that. So after they get cycled through and your name comes up again, you have to. I was in a small division of being in navigation. The second time I was down on the enlisted decks, and I worked in the dish room and the pots and pans. So that was day-to-day activity with that. Those were 2 different times a year apart.
Okay.
But when I got, and your mess cranking was 90 days. So when you got, and if there was general quarters, which was battle stations, you had to go back to your original work assignment and man your battle station there, even if you were on the mess decks.
Okay.
Then when that was over, my responsibility that was given to me was I had to wind the ship's clocks.
Oh, wow.
There was about 60 clocks on the ship. And the reason for that is if the ship takes a torpedo in the side and they sever the electric lines, and clocks stop working if they're electric.
Right.
So all the ships had to be wound. They were 8-day clocks. And that had to be done every Monday. I would go around and wind all the ship's clocks. So I got to see a lot of people and be in a lot of spaces. I went in the captain's bedroom, captain's office, executive officer. I went down in the engine room and wound the clocks in the engine room. And in the dentist office, we had a dental office on the ship and a little hospital bay, everywhere. I got to see everybody and got to know a lot of people. Another one of my jobs as a navigation assistant was to keep charts updated.
Okay.
You know, a ship goes down, they put a buoy there to mark where the sunken ship is. We have to add it to the chart. And that was, we get a publication from the Coast Guard and telling us of updates, and we had to update charts and publications all the time. If there was a light out, the lighthouse, the light was burned out, we had to mark that in our publications. Quartermasters were also in charge of the deck logs. You were there last time, we were talking about deck logs and performance logs. Deck log is something that was filled out every day. Anything that happened on the ship, change of watches, somebody reporting on board, somebody getting hurt. You know, when we were underway, every time the captain says left 10 degrees rudder, you had to write down left 10 degrees rudder. It's an official document, and that's why there's 88,000 pages of it.
Right.
That's the quartermaster's job, is to keep those publications, those chart or deck logs up to, you know, we had to correct them. We had to go in, there could be not any mistakes, any erasures, and if we had to rewrite one, we had to go find all the guys who signed their names and have them re-sign.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it was a pain.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and then we our area to maintain, paint, clean, and keep up was the bridge area, the wheelhouse, and it was nice being up there in the thick of it and see what everything's going on instead of we had hole snipes, which were down in the engine room. They saw no fresh air. So that was basically what my job was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite? Because you had quite an array there, it seems like.
Well, we would have to stand watches underway, and then if we anchored, we had anchor watches where you had to make sure that the ship wasn't dragging its anchor. So you had to take bearings to different objects at different times. I like doing that.
Okay.
Because I was up there by myself. I was responsible for the ship and make sure it stays where it's supposed to stay, but I didn't have anybody breathing down my neck.
That's always nice.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about, like, how many men were on the ship with you?
Our ship carried about 325, and maybe 20 officers, so about 350 Navy guys.
Okay.
We had 2 permanent Marine detached Marine Corps service members. One was a senior enlisted and one was an officer.
Okay.
They were actually, their titles were Combat Cargo Officer and Combat Cargo Assistant. They were permanently assigned to the ship.
Okay.
And when the Marine detachments came on board, they worked hand in hand with them to park the Jeeps and the tanks where they had to park them, and make sure that all the logistics for the 800 plus Marines we carried were taken care of.
That's a lot of extra guys.
And like I said, chow time was a challenge. If you weren't assigned early chow for watch relief, you had to fight for it. And I think our mess decks probably held 100 guys. And we're talking 1,200, 1,300 guys on the ship, so there was constantly rolling over.
Yeah.
And out to sea, there was a lot of times they wouldn't put the chairs out. You'd have to stand and eat because you'd just slide everywhere.
Yeah. Wow. So what about like camaraderie with the guys? Because like you said, when you were doing the clocks, you got to meet everybody. I mean, did you get close to people?
Oh yes, I did. I became friends with a guy who worked down in the engine room, machinist mate, who, when we both got out of the Navy, we both settled in San Pedro, California.
That's nice.
And he's not at this reunion. He was here last time, and I missed last one. But he works at Disneyland in California.
Oh, wow.
His son is a Boston Red Sox pitcher.
Nice.
Yes, Stephen Wright is his son.
Okay.
He's a pitcher for the Red Sox. I mean, the Boston Red Sox. But I got to be friends with him, and it was funny. I got out and got a job and made friends with one of my managers. Come to find out, my manager was going to church with Roy, and they were friends. So it tightened up the circle a little bit.
Yeah.
There was another thing I used to do was I was the mail orderly. I would go get the mail from my division and bring it up from the post office. And one time there was a newspaper from my hometown with some other guy's name on it down in the engine room. So I went down and gave it to him because it got mixed up in the wrong mail. Come to find out he's from my hometown.
That's pretty cool.
But we never became friends.
Oh, really?
And I've tried contacting him to let him know about reunions, and I can't get a hold of him. He doesn't return calls.
Yeah.
But so there's a difference there. Guys I worked with directly over me, I've talked with them, and that's about it. I've met some of the guys who did the same job as me years later,
right?
And we've become friends.
Well, that's cool. You have a common thing there.
Yes,
so.
we had the same job on the same ship, and
really
and we're all on Facebook together.
Yeah. Well, Facebook keeps everybody connected now.
But this is the only way I've been able to keep in contact with people is through the association and the reunions.
That's good. It's nice to
nobody
that this
near me.
formed.
Yeah.
Okay. So were there any? I mean, it's not when you describe some of the places that you guys went on the ship, they seem very picturesque and beautiful. I mean, did you think about that at the time, or was it just we're going here? And when you
when we were in New Caledonia, they're always trying to organize tours for the guys to take. I went on a tour of New Caledonia, and at the end of the tour they had us. Now, New Caledonia is a French territory. Okay. So a lot of French speaking, and they're under the French flag, but a lot of natives. South Pacific natives. We went to a restaurant for a meal, and it was the waterfall on a rock was in the building.
Oh, wow.
The restaurant was built on the side of this waterfall.
Wow.
It was absolutely gorgeous. I took pictures. I've since lost them.
Oh.
Yeah, I've lost a lot of my made some bad decisions in later life and lost a lot of my belongings, but I have some, but not all. I was able to keep my cruise book and my high school yearbooks, but a lot of my pictures disappeared.
That's too bad.
Yeah. But, yeah. Tried to do is what I could. When I was in Hawaii, I rented a car and toured the island. I got to see Gilligan's Island out there off the coast.
All right.
So, Acapulco was gorgeous. I went up to the cliffs and watched some cliff diving.
Yeah.
Yeah. The weird thing about Acapulco, on the beach side of the road, the main road there in the harbor, is all these gorgeous, elaborate hotels.
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
And on the other side of the street, not on the other side of town, but the other side of the street were the shacks.
Yep.
I was hard to understand and fathom.
Yep.
But yeah, things were gorgeous. Like I told you about in Weetalk and going over top that volcano head.
That's what I think would be so interesting.
And then being in the Great Barrier Reef. We actually went down and up into it. And very dangerous waters. We traveled through the Philippine Islands, which we did what they call 12 on, 12 off.
Okay.
You're 12 hours on watch, and you constantly had to be taking bearings. You were in close proximity to land, and you just weren't out on the open ocean. You had to navigate through channels and islands, and that is all gorgeous. Philippines.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And then one thing I'll say about the Philippines I can remember, every single day, about 1 o'clock, right after lunch, it rained.
Oh, really?
Without fail.
It was on a clock, too.
Yes. Every day it would rain for about a half hour or so.
Yeah.
And then we'd have to go up and squeegee the decks and get the water off. But we were right there in the Navy base in the Philippines, and you just look out and see jungle everywhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous. And I went snorkeling in the harbor and brought back a whole bunch of coral and put it in the one of our heads, which is the restroom, that we only opened up for when we were out at sea. It was up on the bridge level, and I put the bag of coral in there and closed the door and locked it. Needless to say, it didn't make it home. Coral is a living organism, and when it dies, it stinks. So,
smelly bathroom then.
Yes. I was told to get rid of that. So, but we had fun. My chief was an old guy, old to me. He was probably only in his 40s, and always playing tricks on us, telling us different things. But I decided to play one on him. Now, chiefs had their own mess. They also had their own sleeping quarters.
Yeah.
And one year, while we were in the Navy, Playboy had a centerfold that was actually the cartoon depiction of that grandma. I don't know if you remember the grandma of Playboy, but I took that grandma centerfold and taped it up underneath his bunk. So
I hope he appreciated a good prank.
Yeah. And well, something else, crossing the line. When you cross the equator, if you have not been across the equator on or any ship, you are called a polywog.
Okay.
And once you cross the equator and you go through the initiation, then you become a shellback. And it's understand now, with political correctness, they don't do the initiations like they used to.
Okay.
And with women on the ships, it's kind of hard to be as brutal as we were. But you crawled from the front of the ship to the back of the ship with your underwear on the outside of your pants, with a big PW for Polywog written on the t-shirt, and you had to crawl, and guys who were already shellbacks had sections of fire hose that they beat you on the butt as you're going by, and they saved all the food garbage up for a week in advance, and you had to crawl through that. And then you got to the end, you had to kiss the royal baby's belly, and his belly was full of grease. And they just shoved it was, and then you had to, go before the King Neptune and, be accepted into the order, the realm of the equator, or the, King Neptune's realm. Mm-hmm. But before the anticipation, before getting to the equator, mm-hmm. they have one guy from each division, even the Marines, mm-hmm. Select one guy to dress up as a girl and participate in a beauty contest.
Oh my.
I mean, these guys were wearing mops on their head for wigs, and the outfits were absolutely hilarious.
I'm sure.
And whoever wins the beauty contest gets to sit with King Neptune and not participate in the initiation. This old guy dressed up as an old grandmother mm-hmm. with a crutch, and the crew voted him the beauty queen. That's what reminded me, telling you about putting that grandma's picture. And,
oh yeah.
Yeah, he didn't have to participate in the initiation, but I mean, we all did it. I mean, it's a tradition. You can go back to World War II and naval history then and find mm-hmm. everybody's done this.
Yeah.
And but now they don't do it.
Oh.
So.
Sounds like you guys had fun on your ship.
Yeah. We had to make fun.
Hey, that's true.
Yeah. And another weird thing is, you go 20 miles off the coast of California when we would leave, mm-hmm. we lose the TV signal.
Okay.
So we had no TV. We had closed circuit television, CCTV, and Hollywood would ship us in VHS tapes of TV shows. Mm-hmm. And so whenever we would get the mail, we'd have TV for a couple of weeks and watch whatever shows and sporting events were popular. And
right.
we all were fascinated with Wonder Woman and soap on that cruise.
It's funny.
Yes. So.
Well, I can understand why you guys had to make up your own entertainment.
Yes. And the big popular game at the time I was on the ship was Risk.
Oh.
And we would have a Risk party that would last all weekend. Mm-hmm. I have to get up and go and watch, so I'd get up and somebody take my place. And they just continued the game. It would go on and on and on mm-hmm. all weekend long.
So when you were a teenager and you said, I gotta go into the Navy, now as an adult and when you went through, was it everything you thought it would be?
Yeah, but I didn't have the girls flocking.
What? That was the whole reason you didn't join.
Yeah. So.
It was a good experience.
It was a good experience, yes. And
good.
So.
Okay. Any other stories you want to share at all? Otherwise, I think we've covered any questions.
I'll tell you one story. I told this at the very first reunion, and it's absolutely hilarious in my opinion. Mm-hmm. The first day I reported on the ship, they showed me around. I put my sea bag down in my area, and they gave me assigned my bunk, and they took me up for chow for mm-hmm. dinner. I'm sitting there eating my dinner, and I hear the bell ring, and it's always in sequence of two. So you hear ding ding, ding ding, then you hear Duluth departing. I'm like, we're pulling out? We're leaving? I'm in navigation. I'm supposed to be on the bridge. Why am I sitting here? Are we leaving? I didn't know that was the tradition of announcing the captain leaving.
Oh, okay.
So if the crew members on watch in the morning at 5 a.m. saw the captain coming up the pier, you'd hear ding, 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 mm-hmm. Duluth arriving.
Okay.
Because the captain is the ship.
Yep.
It wasn't captain arriving, it was Duluth arriving or departing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something funny that I like to tell. I was so befuddled that the ship was leaving, and I wasn't where I was supposed to be to help get it out of port. So